The wind howled through Redemption, a lonely, mournful sound that echoed the turmoil in Sheriff Miles Carter's heart. Outside his office window, the main street looked like an abandoned tomb. The saloon doors hung open, revealing dusty tables and chairs. The jail cell stood empty, its iron bars glinting in the harsh sunlight filtering through the window. And at the end of the street, silhouetted against the blazing sun, stood Clay Maddox, the notorious outlaw, who had brought death and destruction to these parts. Miles felt the weight of the town's sorrow on his shoulders. He was their last hope for justice, their shield against the encroaching darkness. He adjusted the badge on his chest, its silver glint a beacon in the gathering gloom. In this desolate corner of the Wild West, where justice was as elusive as water in the desert and revenge was a dish best served cold, he was about to face the ultimate test. At noon, Clay Maddox would ride into town and Miles would be waiting. It was a showdown that had been years in the making. A collision of two destinies that would determine not just the fate of Redemption, but the very essence of what it meant to be a man of the law. The story of Clay Maddox was a dark stain on the history of the Wild West. His name was synonymous with ruthlessness and fear. He was a man who reveled in chaos, leaving behind a trail of misery and mayhem wherever he went. His gang, a venomous snake of hardened outlaws, had slithered into countless towns, stealing, killing, and burning, leaving behind a legacy of terror that shook the foundations of the frontier. But their most heinous crime was in Redemption. They had murdered Sheriff Carter's wife and son, reducing their home to ashes and leaving behind a gaping hole in the town's collective heart. Miles, consumed by grief and a thirst for vengeance, had sworn to hunt down every member of the gang, bringing them to justice. He'd spent years tracking them, his pursuit taking him from the dusty plains of Texas to the rugged mountains of Montana. One by one, he brought the gang members to justice, each arrest fueling his determination to finally face Clay Maddox himself. The wait had been agonizing, but now Clay was back in town, and the final chapter of this grim tale was about to be written. A lone figure rode into town, silhouetted against the blazing horizon. His name was Clay Maddox, and with his arrival, Redemption held its breath. The townsfolk, hardened by years of living on the edge, watched silently as he dismounted. Every eye in town was on him, every heart pounding in unison with the relentless drum of fate. Clay was a study in contrasts, a dangerous mix of charisma and menace. His steely eyes glinted with an intelligence that was as sharp as the six-shooter at his hip. His movements were fluid, predatory, like a coiled snake ready to strike. And yet there was a strange magnetism about him, a compelling aura that drew the eye and held it captive. As he walked toward the center of town, his gaze steady and unwavering, it was clear that this was a man who knew what he wanted and wasn't afraid to take it. The silence was deafening, broken only by the creak of the saloon doors and the distant caw of a crow. The tension was a palpable thing, a tight, suffocating blanket that settled over Redemption, stifling all sound and movement. It was a standoff, a battle of wills between the notorious outlaw and the stoic sheriff. In the heart of Redemption, the sun beat down mercilessly, turning the main street into a furnace and the air thick and heavy. Every second ticked by like an eternity, every breath a testament to the escalating tension. Finally, as the clock tower chimed 11:59, Clay stopped in the middle of the street, his eyes fixed on the sheriff's office. A single bead of sweat trickled down Miles's forehead as he watched Clay through the window. In this moment, he knew that their destinies were intertwined, that in just 60 seconds, everything would change. With a deep breath, Miles reached for his badge, its coolness a stark contrast to the sweat-slicked skin beneath. He stepped out into the blinding light, his shadow stretching long and thin behind him like a shroud. As he walked towards Clay, each step echoed the thud of a heartbeat. In front of the stunned townspeople, the two men faced off, their eyes locked in a deadly game of cat and mouse. Clay's lips curled into a sneer, revealing a flash of white teeth against his tanned skin. Well, Sheriff Carter," he drawled, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "You finally decide to grace me with your presence?" Maddox Miles responded, his voice as hard and cold as granite. "I've been expecting you." The air crackled with tension. Every eye in the crowd was glued to the two figures in the street, their breaths held in a collective gasp. For a moment, There was nothing but the relentless ticking of the clock and the pounding of hearts. At 12 o'clock the first shot rang out, shattering the silence and sending a spray of dirt and dust flying. The crowd gasped again, their eyes darting from one man to the other as they searched for the source of the shot. But both Clay and Miles stood motionless, their eyes still locked in a deadly embrace. For a split second, the only sound was the echo of the gunshot. Then Clay made a move, quick and unexpected, drawing his gun and firing. The shot missed Miles, embedding itself in the wooden frame of the jailhouse. As the crowd screamed and scattered for cover, Miles returned fire. The bullet found its mark, striking Clay in the chest. The outlaw staggered back, his face contorted in pain and surprise. Blood blossomed on his shirt, staining it a deep crimson. For a moment, the only sound was the ragged gasps of the crowd and the thudding of their own hearts. But Clay was not a man to be defeated so easily. With a snarl, he wiped the blood from his mouth and fired back. The bullet grazed Miles's arm, tearing at his sleeve and leaving a stinging welt. As the gun smoke cleared, the two men stood panting, their eyes narrowed, their hands steady on their guns. The crowd, their faces pale with fear and excitement, watched in stunned silence. In the heart of redemption, the battle of wills continued, a deadly dance of bullets and bravado, of grit and determination. And as the sun beat down relentlessly, it became clear that there could be only one winner. With a guttural yell, Clay lunged forward, firing blindly as he closed the distance between them. Miles, his face grim, sidestepped the bullets, his eyes never leaving his opponent. He returned fire, each shot echoing the pounding of his heart. He was fighting for more than just redemption. He was fighting for his soul, for the memory of his wife and son, for the very essence of what it meant to be a man. Suddenly, Clay stumbled, his movements losing their fluidity, his eyes losing their focus. He was bleeding badly. Miles saw his chance and took it. He pressed forward, his gun a spitting viper, his shots finding their marks. Clay's gang had struck fear into the hearts of countless people, leaving a trail of misery and death in their wake. But their reign of terror was coming to an end. With each shot that Miles fired, the darkness that had loomed over redemption for so long began to lift. And then, as if in slow motion, Clay collapsed, his gun clattering to the ground, his eyes wide and vacant. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the ragged breathing of the men who had stared death in the face and emerged victorious. As the dust settled, Miles stood panting, his clothes torn and bloodied, his face streaked with grime and sweat. Around him, the townspeople emerged from their hiding places, their faces a mixture of awe and gratitude. In the heart of redemption, the relentless showdown had come to an end. Justice, though long delayed, had finally been served. Slowly, carefully, Miles approached the fallen outlaw, his eyes unwavering. He knelt beside Clay, checking for a pulse, his face betraying no emotion. In the heart of the blazing sun, surrounded by the awestruck faces of redemption, Clay Maddox, the scourge of the Wild West, lay dying. Justice had come to redemption, but it wasn't a celebration. It was a solemn moment of reckoning, a tribute to the fallen, and a testament to the enduring spirit of the human will. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across redemption, the townsfolk began to disperse, their whispers carrying tales of the showdown to every corner of the town. The legend of Clay Maddox might live on in the annals of the Wild West. But here in redemption, a new chapter was beginning. A chapter marked by the courage of one man who dared to stand against the darkness and bring it down. That day, the people of redemption learned a valuable lesson. True justice wasn't just about retribution. It was about confronting the darkness within and without, about standing firm in the face of fear and adversity. It was a lesson etched in the blood and sweat of a relentless showdown, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. And so, as the stars twinkled above redemption and the wind whispered tales of courage, the town began to heal. The scars of the past remained, but the future, though uncertain, held the promise of a new dawn.